Federal prosecutors have filed charges against 4 people for the fentanyl-related death of a University of South Florida student. U.S. Attorney for the Middle District of Tampa, Roger Hanberg.
The victim had not asked for fentanyl, which is something that we often see in these cases. Instead, the victim asked for and believed that he was receiving Percocet.
The fatal overdose happened in February. 2 of the men have entered not guilty pleas. Another artificial intelligence company is coming under fire for how it handles news stories online.
Perplexity sells itself as an AI search engine that's able to trawl the web for answers to users' questions, summarize what it finds, and cite its sources. But now Forbes is threatening to take legal action against the startup after the news outlet found Perplexity replicated writing from its website without proper attribution. It also accuses the company of turning its stories into an AI-generated podcast and a YouTube video, all without permission. Forbes says it wants reimbursement for lost ad revenue. Mike Dubusky, ABC News.
Amazon's ditching the plastic air pillows in its North American packages, opting instead for recycled paper filling in the boxes. It's believed to be one of the oldest known examples of a ship sailing far from land. The Israel Antiquities Authority says a company drilling for gas off the northern coast discovered a 3,300-year-old ship and its cargo. Daria Albinger, ABC News.
Angie's List is now Angie, and we've heard a lot of theories about why.
I thought it was an eco move. Fewer words, less paper.
No, it was so you could say it faster.
No, it's to be more iconic.
Must be a tech thing.
But those aren't quite right. It's because now you can compare upfront prices, book a service instantly, and even get your project handled from start to finish.
Sounds easy.
It is, and it makes us so much more than just a list. Get started at Angie.com. That's ANGI, or download the app today.
I'm Bill Walter, KBNU News. News brought to you by Roof Rescue. Permitting records indicate that there was never a threat to the watershed in the Clarkston area, and all proper permitting was obtained to develop a property. Records filed with Cache County indicate not only did a local developer obtain proper permits to cut a road on his property, a state engineer was also called and visited the site to address a possible watershed concern and found there was none, even though there was no open water near where work was being done. As a precautionary measure, the landowner had an environmental engineer with Utah Department of Natural Resources visit the site to determine if a stream alteration permit was necessary. It was determined the drainage areas above the farmland did not have enough natural stream characteristics to require a permit, according to a DNR site visit report. Previously, there was a single-file hiking path. Court records indicate the county expanded that walking path for 200 yards in length and about 10 feet wide. According to a temporary restraining order filed in the court by the owner of the land, rather than discuss the claims with plaintiffs, the county proceeded to bulldoze the alleged Winter Canyon path with a sheriff's escort. The county disputes the area was a public highway and a public thoroughfare and therefore justified it in bulldozing on a public right-of-way. Cache County Trails Development officials put an announcement on the Clarkston City website on May 22nd, attempting to drum up support for making roads on private property west of the city. The attorney for the property owner has stated that Cache County has been very collaborative in working through some of the concerns and issues regarding the permitting process. Work on the property has ceased only because the scope of work for this time of year has been completed. According to the attorney, disturbed areas on the hillside will be reseeded in the fall. In a special legislative session Wednesday, Utah lawmakers passed a resolution requiring state agencies to follow Utah law in conflict with new federal Title IX regulations that provide protections for LGBTQ plus students. Title IX prohibits sex-based discrimination in any school receiving government funding. A law passed in the last session at the Capitol made the resolution binding, requiring all state governments to act and enforce state law over federal law in some Title IX issues. The resolution focuses on state sovereignty and newly passed Utah laws that require students to use the bathroom of their birth sex and ban transgender girls from playing on girls' sports teams. Transgender advocates protested during the special session Wednesday. Senate President Stuart Adams, who supported the resolution, argued that a one-size-fits-all federal approach does not work. And an invitation work by the local congregations of Jehovah's Witnesses has been going on in northern Utah and southeast Idaho over the last several weeks, inviting local residents to the 2024 Declare the Good News Regional Convention to be held at Weber State University's The Event Center later this month. Gregory Hampton, an overseer in the Logan English Language Congregation, said the local congregations are excited about the convention, which will be held this weekend, Friday through Sunday, in Spanish. The English convention will be held the following weekend, June 28th through the 30th. The free three-day live event is expected to draw more than 7,900 attendees to the Ogden area over the course of 2 weekends, fueling the city's economy with local spending at stores, hotels, and restaurants. KVNU weather brought to you by Cache Valley Hearing and Audiology. See them about their personalized hearing improvement program for you. Partly cloudy tonight, low in the upper 50s. Isolated showers and thunderstorms between noon and 3 p.m. on Friday. Isolated showers after 3 p.m. Other than that, mostly sunny and hot into the upper 80s, that is, close to 90 degrees. Get more news at CacheValleyDaily.com.
Roof Rescue is your local roofing specialist, dedicated to keeping your home safe and dry no matter the weather. Their team of experienced roofers is here to serve you, providing top-quality service at affordable prices. From minor repairs to complete roof replacements, they've got you covered. Remember, your roof is your first line of defense in protecting your family from the elements. So don't wait until the next storm to discover your roof problems. Call Roof Rescue today at 435-999-4268. They're your trusted local roofing experts, here to keep your home safe and dry. Roof Rescue, celebrating 10 years of providing watertight peace of mind.
The station for news and talk. KVNU 610 AM and 102.1 FM.
Cache Valley Cruising.
Cache Valley's biggest summer party is almost here. The Cache Valley Cruising, July 4th, 5th, and 6th at the Cache County Fairground. This year, the cruise-in is going Motown with the Commodore. The Commodore. And opening act, the Temptations Review, featuring the legacy of Dennis Edwards. This year, all seats are assigned. So buy your tickets now to ensure you get the best seats available. The giveaway car is a beautifully restored 1950 Ford F3 pickup. And your ticket to the car show is your chance to win the truck. 3 days of fun includes the annual poker run, Women's World, Top Rod of Utah, a sock hop, and more.
Cache Valley Cruising. Cache Valley Cruising.
July 4th, 5th, and 6th at the Cache County Fairgrounds.
Calling all golfers. Do you love tournament golf? I invite you to call Birch Creek today and sign up for the Birch Creek Am or Senior Amateur to be played this Friday, June 21st. The Birch Creek Am and Senior Am is an 18-hole stroke play event. All golfers must have a USGA handicap to participate. So if you love tournament golf, call Birch Creek today at 563-6825 and sign up for this Friday's Birch Creek Am and Senior Am. That's Birch Creek Golf Course in Smithfield.
Are you in need of excellent surgical care? Budge Clinic General Surgery offers the future of surgery with state-of-the-art robotic-assisted procedures. From cancer treatments to surgical needs, they've got you covered. Call Budge Clinic General Surgery today, 435-716-1950, to schedule a consultation and experience the best possible outcome. Trust Doctors Anderson, Marshall, McKenna, and Peterson, the experts at Budge Clinic General Surgery, helping people live the healthiest lives possible.
The Ramsey Show. Up to 50% of American families are paying their adult children's bills to an average of $1,482 a month. Wow. I've never seen it like this. 25% of millennials, their parents are paying their housing, house payment, their rent, or they're living in their basement. You pay your kids' bills. Psychologists call that enabling. As a matter of fact, enabling is quite the opposite of loving.
Evenings on KVNU 610 AM and 102.1 FM.
Did I express myself? Did I let my light shine through? Will an attractive woman cry at my funeral? Check. Probably more than one. Check, 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 check. Lastly, did I achieve success and own real estate?
Welcome back to KVNU's For the People. Yesterday, state lawmakers met in a special session. We played what we could of the floor debate, including remarks by Representative Dan Johnson, serving out the final months of his what will be his final term as a Utah state lawmaker. Dan, if you're out there listening, hope you enjoy retirement and hope that you don't think this is an excuse to not come into the studio and opine on the news of the day with us. So it will reach out, to say the least. But you heard his remarks yesterday. You heard some of the debate. It happened after our show ended, but the vote took place. First up, there were quite a few things on the agenda, but the most noteworthy decisions made during the special session called by Governor Cox yesterday. First was, as we discussed yesterday, a vote to ignore federal Title IX rules that have been added to the Title IX, the slew of protections in Title IX and insurances in Title IX rules by the Biden administration, which include transgender individuals and some expanded protections for women and members of the LGBTQ plus community. Utah lawmakers, this would have put Utah's federal funding at risk, something Utah can't afford to do. Federal funding makes up, given the year, anywhere between 30 and 40% of the cost of our education system, both K through 12 and higher ed. So Utah can't afford to lose that. What Utah lawmakers decided to do yesterday was employ a law they also passed just in this last legislative session, an untested law. Instead of going for straight-up nullification, which the Supreme Court has been very clear on, states don't get to do that. The Supreme Court has never ruled differently. No court, no iteration of the Supreme Court has ever ruled differently, and that makes sense. United States of America, right? So you can't have 50 different countries doing their own thing. There have to be some rules. So states have tried the nullification route before. Mostly red states have been shot down. What Utah lawmakers decided to do back in the legislative session is they passed a law that said, okay, we can't nullify federal law or executive action, but what we are going to change here in Utah is where the burden sits as you wait for the courts to weigh in. So this law passed back in the legislative session said, instead of the status quo, which is, say Congress passes a law and Utah doesn't want to oblige, they don't want to play along, they sue. They take it to court and let the courts weigh in. And they can go all the way up to the Supreme Court if they want to, and that can take years. During that time, the state is usually told by the courts, well, you have to comply until the courts say you don't. Utah passed a law, and this will be tested for its constitutionality as well in the courts. And legislative attorneys have told lawmakers it's likely not constitutional, but we'll see. But this law said if Utah decides to sue, to block executive action or to challenge a law passed by Congress at the federal level that they don't like, Utah doesn't have to play along until the courts say they have to. So Utah wants to kind of flip that script and change it from, thanks, James, change it from Utah having to play along until the courts say they don't and rule in their favor. If that happens, Utah wants to be able to ignore the federal rule until the courts weigh in and say they have to. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. So yesterday, lawmakers voted to put that law to its first test by voting in a resolution to ignore the new Title IX rules. This will head straight to the courts, and then we'll see. But the other big thing on the agenda yesterday that we didn't get a chance to actually hear any of the debate over because it took forever and played out in 3 different committee hearings and more, was a debate over this IPP coal-burning power plant. During the legislative session, the Utah Legislature kind of in a rush, passed a bill that it turns out kind of created a big mess. And the bill basically said Rocky Mountain Power had announced they plan to, in the next several years, retire the last coal-fired electricity-generating power plant in Utah. And this was part of Rocky Mountain Power's broader master plan for the 3 or 4 western states where they operate. And a lawmaker in southern Utah didn't like that. And so a bill was sponsored during the regular session earlier this year to basically tell Rocky Mountain Power, no, you can't do that. The problem is that Rocky Mountain Power is operating under contracts to supply power to Southern California, Wyoming, parts of Utah, most of Utah, but not all of it, surprisingly. And this also has to do with Rocky Mountain Power as a privately owned company having investors and people who are kind of pressuring them to make some decisions. And then you have the state legislature of Utah say, well, no, you can't. And Rocky Mountain Power didn't fight back. I think they thought about it, but in the end, they acquiesced and said, okay, fine, because what this really means is a 4-year delay on doing the same thing. The coal plant will still close, but the legislature, in what some called a tantrum, others said being measured and slowing down the shift to renewable energies. That was the argument made during the legislative session, is that if we move too fast towards these renewable energies, which the legislature felt Rocky Mountain Power's was doing, they worried that we'd start seeing rolling blackouts like Texas is seeing on a regular basis. And critics said, well, Texas is seeing that because they've let their grid fall so far behind, and Utah can avoid that by, instead of wasting this money, spend the money on updating the grid and being prepared. Lawmakers passed the bill. The governor signed it. City leaders came out en masse against Senator Darren Owen from Fountain. He's a Republican from Fountain Green. They came out against his bill and begged the governor to veto it. Morgan County officials, not exactly the blue area of the state, begged the governor to veto it because they have an ongoing. They're in the middle of an ongoing work with a different kind of power arrangement that they've been working on for a few years, and this bill upends it. So city leaders, about 14 different mayors, and about 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 county commissioners from all over Utah begged Governor Cox to veto this bill. He did not. He signed the bill, and with the promise they would fix it. And that's also what happened yesterday in the legislative session. So there's the lengthy setup. What did they actually do? Well, the short version of it is Utah taxpayers, just bought a power plant. For better or worse, you are now the owner-operator of a power plant. That's what the legislature did yesterday. What does this mean, though? And who are we going to sell that power to? One lawmaker yesterday confessed there currently aren't any buyers. We'll talk about the potential ramifications, fallout, as the Deseret News called it in their report today, from the legislature's decision yesterday to take over the IPP coal-fired power plant. We'll talk about it right after this.
From gardening to landscaping, it's the Garden Guide.
I'm really excited about my asparagus that I have planted in a raised garden box.
Awesome.
I'm wondering what I can do to make those the most successful this year.
Don't harvest anything that is smaller in circumference than, say, your pinky. So,
Okay.
so we want to let them get bigger. This time of year would be an excellent time to throw a little bit of slow-release fertilizer out there, but something that will move through the soil a little bit.
The Garden Guide, Saturday mornings at 8 on News Talk KVNU.
Utah, it's time to elevate your work game with the new Polaris Ranger XP 1000. With the upgraded Gen 2 transmission, LED headlights, and a pre-installed roof and winch, it's built to help you get more done and have more fun. Polaris, think outside.
How was your drive to school?
Let me tell you, I had to get my iced coffee first. I just can't seem to put it down. My favorite rapper just announced a tour. My phone was buzzing like crazy. I'm so excited. I had to text all my friends right then to talk about it. Then, someone started calling me and...
Let's try that again.
I turned my phone off right away. I never drive distracted.
Visit StopTextsStopWrecks.org. A message brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, Project Yellow Light, and the Ad Council.
All right, dads, let's test your knowledge. Ready? What does this sound? Some of the more experienced parents recognize it as the sound a young teenager makes when he's done something he regrets. Listen. Kind of a sad sound, isn't it? But if you recognized it, then you know exactly what to do. Listen, because that's when together you can both figure out how not to make the same mistake again.
This message from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Welcome back to KVN News for the People. If you're just tuning in, you missed my very lengthy setup. I'm trying to make sure I get all the details on this setup before we get into what the legislature actually decided yesterday. The long story short version, Utah legislators yesterday, after first bringing this up with a bill passed in the general session back in the spring, in response to city leaders' outcries and begging the governor to veto the bill because it will upend, several cities in Utah's long-term power planning for their own power. They begged the governor to veto this bill to keep forcing Rocky Mountain Power to keep the IPP coal-fired plant open down south, and the governor didn't. But the promise was they'd fix it. It made a mess, basically. It was poorly written and rushed. Our legislature specializes in that lately, unfortunately. But they did fix it yesterday. In the end, what the decision was, well, I mean, I guess it depends on your opinion whether they fixed it or broke it more. But they addressed the city's concerns yesterday, and how they did that is they removed portions of the bill. They took out a lot of the micromanaging of Rocky Mountain Power that the original bill passed in the legislative general session back in the spring had. What that means is basically the same thing, which is the legislature taking over. You, the taxpayer, now own a coal-burning power plant. They slowed it down. That's what made the city leaders who were griping about the bill happy. And that did include Morgan County officials as well, who said this would upend their long-term power plans. If Rocky Mountain Power changed the schedule, it was going to screw up their own planning for long-term power supply. So, the legislature fixed all of that yesterday. And the way they fixed it was by doing the same thing but slowing it down. So the legislature is still going to operate. They took over. I'm not exaggerating. They took over the power plant. You, the taxpayer, own a coal-fired power plant in Utah. So the next question is, what happens next? Who do we sell it to? The law required the Intermountain Power Agency, which operates the power plant in Delta, to submit a new application for an air quality permit by July 1st that would allow for operating the coal plant while still keeping the next generation power plant online. The original bill took the next generation, the cleaner power plant, offline. It took it completely out of the mix. They basically told Rocky Mountain Power, you can't do this. We've spoken. The bill passed yesterday took that back. And leadership, IPA's leaderships, IPA is the sort of the interstate power company committee, for lack of a better way to describe them. Their leadership and more than 15 local governments had objected to the approach the legislature has taken, and again tried to get the governor to veto the bill, warning that it would put existing agreements in jeopardy and would prompt undue federal attention, and they didn't want that. So yesterday, the lawmakers pulled this back. They removed the threat of the state takeover of the Power Agreement Committee, the IPA, which would have led to a long and expensive legal battle, to say the least, because there's no a state actually can't do that. So they took out that part of the Intermountain Power Agency, which is a committee, again, that kind of brings all players together to oversee power management in several states. Long-term planning, the key goal. So yesterday they took that part out. The original bill said they'd take over the Intermountain Power Agency, and they took that out yesterday at the request of city and county leaders here in Utah. And Cameron Cowan, who is CEO of the IPA for the time being, told the Legislative Committee yesterday that they have no objections to the new bill. They appreciated the changes. He said it makes some important adjustments and definitely moves things in a much smarter direction than the original bill do. The new bill still allows the state to buy the coal plant. So taxpayers, you now own a coal plant or a coal-fired power plant. And but then what comes next part? The bill hopes to grease the wheels on the sale of the plant to someone else who can operate it. Senator Darren Owens, who sponsored both the original bill and the replacement bill in the special session yesterday, he reiterated his concerns that keeping the coal plant running is an imperative, saying it is a point of national security. Bit dramatic, but what he's saying basically is that he's making the argument that we're not ready to transition, as Rocky Mountain Power says they're ready to more renewable fuels-based power supply, geothermal, wind, solar, all of those things. Rocky Mountain Power says they're ready. And by the way, none of this is going to happen until 2032 anyway. Senator Owens says that's too rushed. It'll create rolling blackouts like they're seeing in Texas. We'll have problems. Representative Colin Jack of St. George from the same area agreed with Senator Owens and noted that the nation has to add dozens of gigawatts of power in the coming year just due to population growth. Rocky Mountain Power again says we can handle that. The state said we don't believe you, and so what they did is they stripped out all the regulatory issues and threats from the original bill, and they said, but we're still going to buy this plant. And then we're going to find someone else to buy the plant from us. House Speaker said that one other thing, the bill also pushes back the deadline for addressing air quality issues from the original July 1st to the end of this year. So that means the decommissioning authority can wait to see if a more coal-friendly administration, a new president, basically, other than Biden, comes in and changes these rules, at which point they could slow this down even more. Mike Schultz, Speaker of the House, said that wasn't a part of their calculation. It probably was. And if this is the way they want to go, it's probably a smart calculation to see at least how it plays out. But in the end, what the state has to do now is find someone to buy this power plant and operate it. Yesterday during this discussion, both the bill sponsor and several other lawmakers in the House involved said they don't have any interested parties. They've asked. Senate President Stuart Adams said, he came right out and said they have not had a single response from potential owners, operators, or even, this was the part that dropped everyone's jaw, Senator Adams said during the committee hearing before the bill got its floor vote that his exact words, there has not been nary a sniff from potential customers. But he said, we think that renewable energy sources are going to be so faulty and so not ready for prime time that they'll be knocking down Utah's door to buy power from this coal-fired power plant. So that's the calculation. Right now, no one's interested in buying the plant from the state or from you, the taxpayers, and no one's interested in buying power from the plant. But the calculation lawmakers made yesterday is that will change when everybody realizes that these renewable sources Rocky Mountain Power says are ready to go. Senate President Stuart Adams saying that the legislature believes Rocky Mountain Power is wrong. The renewable sources are not ready to go, and everybody will be glad that this coal-fired option exists when they discover that. So that's the bet Utah lawmakers made yesterday. If they're right, great. Somebody will buy that plant in a second, operate it, and that power will have no shortage of people wanting to gobble it up, and that money goes back to the state. If they're wrong, well, you, the taxpayer, just bought a coal-fired power plant that no one's ever going to want to buy again. So we're stuck with it. That was the other big decision on Capitol Hill yesterday. If you want to read the legislation, it's actually an interesting read. I don't say that about actual legalese bills very often, but it's an interesting read because it talks a lot about what the current lay of the land is when it comes to Utah's power grid, where some of the shortcomings are, and that's what this was based on. Again, critics said, why don't we just fix our power grid instead of buying coal plants that maybe don't have any customers? That's a fair question, but this is what lawmakers decided to do. So check it out. I've linked to the actual legislation. Again, it's kind of an interesting read. You'll learn a lot about the Utah's current grid system, where it's at, where some of the shortcomings are, where some of the areas that lawmakers and legislative analysts are worried about the future of Utah's power grid, and where some work needs to be done. All of that is actually included in the legislation, making the argument that the state needed to take over this coal-fired plant, which they did back in the spring. That didn't change yesterday, but they walked back some of the threats that were in the legislation and slowed it down quite a bit. So now basically we're back on the same time frame the Rocky Mountain Power originally wanted. But in the process, we bought a power plant. We'll be back with more of KVNU's For the People after a quick look at the news with KVNU's Bill Walter.
Jason, KVNU News, brought to you by Logan Extermination. Utah Connections Academy, a statewide tuition-free online public school for K through 12 students, celebrated the graduation of 117 students in the class of 24 on May 30th at 5 p.m. The virtual ceremony featured student and staff speakers, student recognition awards, and a slideshow of graduates from across the state, including Brighton Baker from Mendon and Lena Israelson from Hiram. Utah Connections Academy's class of 2024 has worked incredibly hard to achieve this major milestone and are fully equipped with the skills and knowledge to make a real difference in the world. That's what Erin Taylor said, a school leader at Utah Connections Academy. She said that she is immensely proud of all the graduates, what they've accomplished in their educational and personal journeys, and she cannot wait to continue cheering them on in their future endeavors. Among the notable graduates is Arab Kaleem, a Sterling Scholar and National Merit Scholarship finalist. Kaleem chose Utah Connections Academy for its flexible learning pace and variety of courses, including AP classes and career planning opportunities. This year's valedictorian, Aspen Downing, is a Sterling Scholar and recipient of a presidential scholarship from a local university and already has 26 college credits, aspiring to become a labor and delivery nurse. Utah Connections Academy, now in its 13th year, serves more than 1,200 students statewide. The school offers flexible learning plans tailored to each student's needs and abilities, with state-certified teachers providing individualized attention and a positive, engaging learning atmosphere. New details have been released in a probable cause statement reporting that Mia Bailey, who was wanted as a suspect in a double homicide, admitted to shooting her parents to death. Police said when they arrived on scene Tuesday, they found two deceased adults who were later identified as Bailey's parents. Both were covered in blood, police said. After searching for Bailey, police were tipped off she was in the area of Horseman Park and River Road in St. George. When officers found her, court documents said she pulled a gun from her waistband and held it to her head as she walked away from police. They lost sight of her. Bailey was apprehended Wednesday morning when she surrendered to police near the St. George Temple. Police said Bailey admitted to entering her mother and father's house and shooting them in an attempt to kill them before going downstairs, where her brother and his wife locked themselves in his bedroom. Bailey told police she shot through the locked door, stating she did not care if the shot had killed him. Police said they found evidence of a small bullet hole in Bailey's brother's door. Bailey then went back upstairs to make sure her parents were dead, according to police. Mia further stated that she did not have remorse for her actions and that she would not change what she had done. Mia said that she hated them. Bailey is charged for 7 counts of felony discharge of a firearm, 3 counts of aggravated murder, and 1 count of aggravated burglary. KBNU weather brought to you by Napa Auto Parts. Keep your car running smooth and looking good with Napa Gold Filter and 5 Quarts Premium Full Synthetic Oil for $35. at your locally owned Preston to Providence Napa Auto Parts stores. Partly cloudy tonight, low in the upper 50s. Isolated showers and thunderstorms early Friday afternoon. Isolated showers after 3 p.m. Tomorrow, high in the upper 80s, close to 90 degrees. Get more news at CashValleyDaily.com.
With summer here, our beautiful lawns face a new threat. It's a threat you can't see because it's happening below the grass level, at the roots. Those nasty bill bugs and grubs are beginning to hatch and they are hungry. Your lawn is a smorgasbord to them and they can't wait to belly up to the table. Get a jump on those bugs by calling Logan Extermination today. They'll apply a custom spray for bugs and also fertilize to keep weeds under control and your grass growing tall. Logan Extermination, 752-8450.
ABC News, I'm Daria Albinger. Police in Oakland, California are investigating a shooting during a Juneteenth celebration which wounded at least 15 people. The White House is responding to questions about tensions with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, saying no country supports Israel's defense as much as the U.S.
It was perplexing, to say the least, certainly disappointing, especially given that no other country is doing more to help Israel defend itself against the threat by Hamas and, quite frankly, other threats that they're facing in the region.
National Security Council spokesman John Kirby. What was once Tropical Storm Alberto is now weakening over central Mexico. The first named storm of the Atlantic hurricane season roared ashore early today, leaving at least 4 dead. More than 100 million people are under heat alerts again tomorrow. This is ABC News.
This is Mark Anderson with Anderson Seed and Garden. Our summer parking lot sale is underway. For a limited time, save big on all kinds of plants and trees. Fruit trees are now 30% off. Anderson's beautiful, colorful hanging baskets are 40% off. And perennials are now 25% off too. Also, get ahead of those nasty grasshoppers with sprays, baits, and repellents. Anderson's has all kinds of options for you to stop them right now. It's also time to apply Hydrotain to make your watering go 30 to 50% farther in this heat. Anderson Seed and Garden, 69 West Center in Logan. Online at andersonseedandgarden.com.
Hi, John Weiss here. Summer means a whole world of opportunities. Whether your plans is hauling the boat, captaining the summer road trip, or exploring the wilderness, Heritage Ram has a vehicle for you at our Make This the Summer sales event. All month long, you get $3,000 total bonus cash allowance, plus no monthly payments for 90 days when you purchase a 2024 Ram Heavy Duty Tradesman Crew Cab pickup truck. See dealership for details. Come visit your friends at Heritage Ram, your hometown dealer with the biggest deals.
Hi, it's Olivia Munn with My Shelter Pets, Frankie and Chance, reminding you that when you adopt a shelter pet, you discover all the things that make them unique. Adopt pure love at theshelterpetproject.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council, the Humane Society of the United States, and Maddie's Fund.
Senior Moments, sponsored by the Empowering Seniors Group on News Talk KVNU.
My name is Bruce Lee. I'm here with my co-host Sid Roder. We're here for another fun show.
This radio show is sponsored by the Empowering Seniors Group, which is a group of professionals that has dedicated their time and efforts to provide information that is hopefully useful to seniors, their family members, caretakers, and really anybody who's interested.
Senior Moments, every Saturday morning at 7:30, right here on News Talk KVNU.
Do you have a house?
Welcome back to KVNU's For the People. In other news today, Senator Mitt Romney unveiled what he's calling the EMBER Act. This is, well, perfectly timed, unfortunately. I wish it was poorly timed. I wish we didn't have to worry about wildfires in general, but Utah averages 800 to 1,000 wildfires a year. Most of these don't make news or headlines, obviously, but they do require state resources, county resources, city resources, sometimes federal resources if a wildfire is big enough. And, of course, every one of those has the potential to become an absolute catastrophe, even if it's out in the middle of nowhere. Just a shift in the wind can blow. This happened a few years ago. Remember, there was a wildfire struck by lightning in a pretty remote area of the western Uinta Range, and they just decided to let it burn because it was an area that was scheduled for a controlled burn anyway, and it was so far away from any structures or houses or even roads. So they just let it burn. And everyone was on board with that. The governor's office, the Utah fire officials, the county and city fire officials in the nearby areas, federal government, everybody agreed, yep, let it burn. It'll burn that fuel out, which we're going to have to do anyway, and it's so far away. And then the winds changed. And overnight, it went from let it burn, this is actually a good thing, will save us some money because we'll have to do a controlled burn next year after all, to panic, evacuation of Spanish Fork and surrounding areas. And that was overnight just due to the wind shifting. So every one of these 800 to 1,000 fires annually has the potential to be an absolute public emergency. With that in mind, and wildfires getting more widespread, and the data suggests that wildfires are also getting more destructive. They're burning further and they're harder to put out because things are drier and hotter for longer. And so what has been we've never had a time when wildfires weren't an issue for Western states, but it's becoming more of one, is a way to say it. And Senator Romney said that he feels this has actually become a national priority, meaning that the federal government needs to prioritize what's happening with wildfires in Western states. So Romney, serving out the final months of what will be the last year of his last term and single term as United States Senator, said this was something very important to him. In a press release today announcing the EMBER Act, he said, effectively addressing the growing threat of wildfires across the country will require us to modernize our policies and focus on bolstering resilience and restoration efforts, meaning that what Romney wants to do with the EMBER Act is to create a full-on, constant process of addressing wildfires. So instead of fighting the wildfires and doing a little bit of prevention after the fire's burned out or put out, he wants it to be an ongoing thing that anytime you can, you're doing something to prevent wildfires. And that can include doing restoration efforts in advance. Things we've always talked about, like clearing out fuel where it's healthy enough for a forest to do so. Other things like more money for larger crews for controlled burns and things like that. So here are some of the things that the EMBER Act will do. First, it will relax the burdens placed on states and localities, counties and cities, by allowing FEMA to reduce or waive this matching or cost-sharing requirement that is in place for wildfire planning and recovery efforts. Right now, if there is a wildfire and it becomes a public emergency and FEMA is involved, there's no worry for the state as far as matching or cost-sharing. But if they want to do wildfire prevention and planning and recovery projects that involve FEMA, and there is this equation of how much the state has to pick up. The EMBER Act would shift this more away from the states and localities and shift the burden, the cost burden, more on the federal government. The act would also, because it's a set of bills, would also provide incentives for repurposing waste derived from restoration activities and risk reduction projects into sustainable fuels and other commercialized goods. So basically things, when they go in and clear out dead wood or clear out fuel or things like that, it will sort of streamline the process for them being able to sell that back into the private market, into commercialized markets. The Act would also expand targeted grazing by providing non-renewable and temporary grazing permits and leases on areas where we're talking about places where grazing maybe has never been permitted before, but there are these situations that come up. This gets environmentalists upset, but ironically, and with good reason, because grazing and grazing permits have been abused in the past. So environmentalists, like it or not, have just cause to be suspicious when we talk about grazing. But I think we do a much better job of managing that now, a much more responsible job of managing that now. And so now I think it's time for those on the environmental side of things to admit that there is a role grazing can play, because grazing is one of the most rising tides lifting all ships ways to clean out fuel. I mean, literally, this can, if carefully done, even in areas where grazing has never been permitted before, it can be done in a way that leaves no permanent damage. It can be done in a way that does not affect the long-term health of the forest, or grassland, if that's what you're talking about. But it can literally mean the difference between ample fuel and very little fuel for a wildfire. What that means is that if a wildfire is sparked by lightning or somebody being careless with a cigarette or a flamethrower, as we saw here in Utah one year when things were so dry that someone parked a car in a field, that was enough to spark a wildfire that almost burned Saratoga Springs down when it was just getting up and running as a sort of a subdivision of Salt Lake County. This grazing can be a huge tool in this because it doesn't take a huge amount of time or even a large number of cattle. I mean, we're talking thousands. You can't throw 2 cows out and hope that they're going to do enough. I mean, they'll do some, but you're going to need a lot more than that. So, I mean, realistically, we are talking, grazing that is going to be noticeable in areas where grazing has never been permitted before. But with a temporary and non-renewable grazing permit, you could literally go through, clean all that fuel out in a year that is going to be wildfire prone. We know this based on the spring. When it comes to when we're talking about the type of wildfire prevention that grazing would help reduce the risk, we're talking about grasses. We're talking about things cows would eat, and so in the spring, fire managers can, if you've ever talked to, we've done it here on the show several times, we've had them here in the studio, but you talk to a fire marshal or someone in Utah Forestry or even someone who's worked with the National Park Service before, they'll tell you that they can look at how things play out in the spring and basically gauge the wildfire risk in the summer because they can see if we get a very wet spring, and then it's followed by an early warm season, that grass just goes crazy and can be 3-4 feet high by, drive up the canyons right now. There are places in Logan Canyon, Blacksmith Fork Canyon, where some of those grasses are 3 and 4 feet high already, and it's just a little over mid-June. All of that is going to dry out by mid-July, and then it's just going to sit there and get more dry through August. And our wildfire season, meaning the thunderstorms and lightning, the recreation, all of the things, dragging trailer chains, all these things that can spark a wildfire, that season doesn't end until October. So there's plenty of fuel. It's going to be ready to be fuel, ready to spark a wildfire by mid-July. And we got to make it till October, when that's when the wildfire season is typically over here in Utah. There have been years when it went further than that. We had, in 2021, wildfire season actually went into November. But usually it's October. And so that's what Romney's bill is meaning to address. This is going to be controversial because if you look at the details of the legislation he's introducing here, he's talking about issuing non-renewable and temporary grazing permits for a summer on land that has always been off limits. And so that's going to get some pushback. But it's a smart approach. In a year, if you have a year like this one where this is going to be the grasses, you look at the grasses and there's going to be a problem, you could just that summer and never again, or just whenever you need to, issue those grazing permits. It benefits the ranchers, obviously. This is food for their cows. And then it benefits everyone else because those cows go through and clean all of that fuel out. And again, if it's done in a non-renewable temporary permit kind of way, you're not talking long-term damage to anything. So, I mean, other than maybe some mucked up stream and river banks from the cows, that takes care of itself within a season if they're not back in the area again the next year. And back to the bill itself, this EMBER Act, it would also, and this is a really important part, Romney's act would update policies and guidance for post-fire incident recovery. That is, I didn't know this until today, but apparently that is where things have gotten the most expensive in this incident recovery, and incident recovery means you have a wildfire, it goes through, they get it under control, they get it out, and at that point there's a lot of debris removal, emergency protective measures that have to be put in place. Toxicity of drinking water is an issue, and so mitigation efforts have to take place to make sure if a wildfire happens in something that contributes to a watershed or a reservoir or anything that's going to end up in the drinking water system, that toxicity of that water coming off those burned areas is an issue and requires a lot of effort to clean. And so reducing the number of wildfires would help, obviously, but assuming you're still going to have some, Romney's act would update some of the policies and guidance to sort of streamline that process and better coordinate between agencies who would step in after the fire is out for these recovery efforts. So this isn't the first time Senator Romney has made wildfire mitigation a big deal. In fact, his very first year in office, it was a priority for him. But probably his biggest first step was in 2020. He announced the Wildfire Mitigation and Management Commission Act legislation that would establish a commission of federal and non-federal stakeholders, including city and county level representatives from western states, to study and recommend fire prevention, mitigation, management, and rehabilitation policies. And that resulted in the EMBER Act. The introduction of the EMBER Act follows a hearing that happened a couple of months ago in which there was a discussion about modernizing federal wildfire policies based on this previous effort of Romney's to put this commission together to study it, the Wildfire Mitigation and Management Commission. And that's a fascinating discussion. If you have a chance, go take a listen. You can find that on C-SPAN under, just search for Mitt Romney. In fact, I think it's still the most recent thing entered under his name at the C-SPAN website. But this is a pretty big deal. Utah Governor Spencer Cox weighed in. He said that there's a mistaken belief the wildfires are the inevitable result of climate change and there's nothing we can do except clean up afterwards. The recommendations of the Wildfire Commission Senator Romney put in place in 2020 disprove that and show that despite the challenges of climate change, there are a lot of actions the federal government can take to prevent and reduce catastrophic wildfires. The governor added that Deseret News reports that recommendations include expediting permitting for active forest management and more, quote, common sense grazing policies, enforcing collaboration between the Interior Department, the USDA, and other federal agencies. Governor Cox said, much of these policies should have been happening long ago, so I'm very grateful for Senator Romney's good work to make them a reality today. So as far as whether or not this can pass, odds are good. Romney has a pretty decent track record. What he introduces generally passes. And according to UtahFireInfo.gov, Utah has had 280 wildfires so far just this season, with about 5,000 acres burned. So Romney's got that to point at and say, look, we got to talk seriously about this. We'll see where it goes. If you want to read the act, I've linked to the legislation from Romney's own website, and we'll be back with more of For the People right after this.
When I first ran as a candidate, I made the simple promise that I would listen and restore your voice. I listened while holding dozens of town hall and cottage meetings, and by responding to hundreds of emails, texts, and phone calls. I helped a family when their contractor failed to finish their new roof, when a family couldn't get their money from the state's MyCash website, and when a family needed help navigating services for their elderly mother. This is Representative Mike Peterson, and I sponsored this message.
Today's hearing aid technology can improve not only your life, but the lives of the people who care about you. Once again, you'll be able to hear the reason for their laughter and understand conversations. Dr. Paul Danes will customize a hearing improvement program to meet your unique requirements, whatever they are. Call Dr. Danes for an appointment at 753-HERE and let him show you how.
Bring back what you've been missing. Bring back Cache Valley Hearing and Audiology. Talk 610 AM, 102.1 FM, KVNU.
When I I grow up, I want to be a new pair of blue jeans.
When I grow up, I want to be a kid's first computer.
When I grow up, I don't want to be a piece of garbage. And if you recycle me, I won't be.
Give your garbage another life. Recycle. Learn how at iwanttoberecycled.org. Brought to you by Keep America Beautiful and the Ad Council.
I will be right by your side.
Women can have it all, including heart attacks. But symptoms like jaw pain, nausea, unusual fatigue, dizziness, and backache are often different and more subtle than for a man. The fact is, heart disease is the #1 killer of women. Know the signs. Learn more at getheartchecked.org. From Women's Heart Alliance, in partnership with Women Heart.
Welcome back to KVNU's For the People. I want to thank everyone for tuning in. This has been a nice, relaxing show. Okay, it's not really. A little hectic to be here in a new studio trying to learn new equipment. We're doing our best, and it's going pretty well, actually. It could be going worse. How about that? Just a reminder to listeners, we are currently without phone lines, so we can't invite calls for the time being, but that should be changing soon, hopefully early next week. We'll be back to that, and if that's the case, coming up on Monday's show, we're going to ask everyone to weigh in and talk about if you've voted, how you voted, if you want to share that, but also why you're supporting this candidate, that candidate, our election tradition to open the phone lines, if we have those phone lines on Monday's show. Tomorrow on the program, the For the People movie show with Andy Morgan. Nothing new in theaters, but this gives us a chance to catch up and to talk about what's happening on the streaming services, which is a lot. That's tomorrow on the For the People movie show. Stick around. Dave Ramsey next here on KVNU Logan.
Covering all the news. Stay with 610 AM and 102.1.